I'm just gonna straight up say it. This film is not worth your time. It's a fundamentally awful film, and if you've read the books, this film is actively trying to destroy the legacy of Ian Colfer's Artemis Fowl. Now, what I just said may sound harsh, but trust me, the film deserves every bit of criticism coming its way. I just finished watching the film and I feel disgusted at not only the incompetence of the film, but also the incompetence of the people behind it. There are so many things the film did wrong. Not poorly, wrong. And the annoying part is that it all could have been avoided if they just cared enough to actually understand the source material they're adapting from. I don't understand how this film came to be. Surely the people working on the film would have known the quality of what they were making. How can someone watch the final cut of this film and say, "Yup, that's a blockbuster for you"? Look, I understand that I'm talking out of my ass on this one since I don't really know the intricacies and behind the scenes of how Hollywood films work. But in the same way that this film is grasping at straws by shamefully teasing a sequel to this one, I'm also grasping at straws trying to figure out how they can mess up a film that is based on an already pre-existing successful book franchise this badly. How in the fuck does that happen? How? Fuck me, man. Ugh. There's so many things wrong about this film, I don't even know where to start criticizing it from. Because finding something you can genuinely enjoy about this film is like trying to find a good reason to justify the Holocaust. I'm sure someone out there can do it. Stranger things have happened. But they shouldn't. Because it's messed up. And wrong. And this metaphor has really gone off the rails, let's get back on track. My point is that this film is dog shit in almost all conceivable manner and is a direct insult to Ian Colfer's work, to the fans of his book, like myself, and to the art of cinema in general. And before you go and dismiss this review of mine as just another ungrateful book fan who didn't get the exact adaptation he so desperately wanted, let me try and defend myself by saying this. I understand that we book fans become major critics, and I would even argue assholes when it comes to movies and TV shows that adapt some of our favorite books. We tend to overanalyze and unfairly nitpick these films just because it doesn't loyally adapt the books that we love page per page, or it changes things or cut out stuff that adds depth and nuance to the story, yada yada yada. And I get the hate and perception of elitism that other people accuse book fans of when they do this, because I understand that changing some things or cutting out stuff is a necessity when it comes to adapting a story from a different medium into another one, because there are some things that work for one medium that doesn't necessarily translate into the next. But I think in this particular case, my frustration about this dumpster fire of a film is definitely justified, because this pathetic attempt to cash grab didn't just change some stuff to better fit the medium it's being adapted on, it changed practically everything from the books, to the point where it's unrecognizable as an Artemis Fowl story. The very essence of what made the books unique and beloved by many people who've read it is thrown out the window by this sack of shit that shamefully disguises itself as a film. And the end product isn't even something to be proud about. They changed so much from the source material, and guess what happened? They made the worst film of 2020 so far. And again, it didn't have to be. I'm not saying you shouldn't take creative liberties when adapting a story, but at least understand the heart of it. What makes it so compelling for so many people, and translate that to your film. Edge of Tomorrow is a great example of this, where it changed a lot of the things from its source material, but it was able to keep the essence, the heart of the original story intact. Because if they were just gonna change everything from the source material without understanding the heart of its story, then I would have much preferred if they had just made an uninspired, page-per-page adaptation of the book, because that would have at least been watchable than this turd-infested garbage. But enough of my colorful language, let's just get to the review part of this video. Take in mind, this is coming from someone with the perspective of having read the books, so take that as you will. Objectively, this film is terrible. It's not just a terrible adaptation, it's also a terrible film in general. Having said that, there are some passable things that this film did. For example, the music does its job for the most part. I'm not a musical expert, so from my perspective, it was decent. Not outstanding or anything like that. It was just fine. The location shots were okay. Take note, I'm just referring to the establishing shots of the film. When it comes to the actual cinematography and camera work, they're very mediocre at best. The climactic sequence was a f***ing joke, especially. What else? The VFX were decent, I guess, which is not surprising considering the budget for this film was a ridiculous $125 million US. With a budget like that, the least they could have done was make a watchable film, but no, that's too much for Artemis Fowl. And that's about it. Those are the only non-awful things about this film. And if your VFX and music is the only passable aspect of your film, then my gosh, do you have an extremely shallow film. But now it's time to get to the insulting aspects of this film, if you can even call it that. The story is way too rushed because they tried to adapt the first 2 books of the franchise alongside elements from the rest of the books into a 2-hour-long film. Right, because doing this isn't gonna fucking mess with the pacing of your film because that's not how movies work, right? Oh wait, it turns out that's exactly how movies work. You mess with the pacing of the film and guess what? The payoffs suffer badly for it. And oh boy, were the payoffs in this film dreadfully uninteresting. The writing of this film was also god-awful. The whole father storyline was a mess, not to mention his increased role is another unnecessary and pointless addition by the film. I knew that casting such a big-name actor for the role of the seemingly trivial father in the books was a bad choice from day one, ever since I saw the first trailer, and well, I was fucking right. It's a tensionless film and the tone is so inconsistent it's laughable. They hide the villain's appearance yet name drop her in the middle of the film without any meaningful setup, which further proves my point of this film being tensionless and lacking in suspense. Plus, the world building in this film is almost non-existent. They put a huge emphasis on magical creatures and their society, yet we get almost no exploration of it. The rules and lore of the magical world was something that made the book so engaging to read because they were properly established. So when Artemis eventually started breaking those rules or taking advantage of them, it felt all the more rewarding. This film does the barest of jobs establishing the world and doesn't do a good enough job representing Artemis Fowl's exceptional world building and lore from the books. But I think easily the worst part of this film is the characters. If we just focus solely on the characters of the film and not compare them to their book counterparts, not a single one of them is commendable in any way at all. The casting of this film is so ridiculously bad, I'm convinced they did it on purpose just to mess with its viewers. Character interactions don't make any sense and the acting and performances were especially atrocious. I'm not gonna badmouth the child actors because they're child actors. The responsibility of their performances lie on the director directing them. But the rest of the cast? They have no excuse. Casting Josh Gad and Judi Dench as Mulch Dickens and Commander Root respectively is probably the single most idiotic decision of this film. And whoever is responsible for making both of them speak in those ridiculous voices should be blacklisted from Hollywood. Josh Gad especially. His insulting performance as Mulch Dickens was something that made my experience of watching this film, which was already hard enough on its own, 10 times more painful, especially hearing his awful voice narrating in the background. And that's just taking into account the film's version of the characters. If we compare them to their book counterparts, it's a whole other level of incompetence. The characters of the film are lifeless, empty imitation of the characters from the books. Every single one of them are so bad and so disastrously awful, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for the actors portraying them. The characters in the film have lost all the characteristics that made them likable in the books. I'm not even exaggerating on this. It's like the writers just took the most basic trait of the characters from the books and just based the characters of the film on just that. Apparently, Foley being a centaur is the only thing they got from his character. Not his paranoid, tinfoil wearing, and petty personality, just that he's a half-man, half-horse centaur. And apparently, Commander Julius Root, the cigar-smoking, hard-headed commander of the Reconnaissance Division of the Lower Elements Police, is a woman in the writer's eyes. Look, I'm not against diversity and representation in films, but there is no good reason to gender swap such an iconic character. Not to mention, they had the audacity to change even the most fundamental quality that defined the characters in the books. For example, and this is gonna be spoilers by the way, changing the Fowl family legacy to be the peacekeepers of the world to me speaks a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material. What makes Artemis Fowl in the book so compelling is that he starts off as the villain, a true criminal mastermind, In book 1, he is literally the antagonist of that book. His story is about learning to become a hero, and that happened throughout the course of multiple books. If the film so desperately wanted to establish a franchise with this film, to the point where they even shamefully tried teasing a sequel, then they should have just followed the course of the books instead of diverging completely off of it. Because the film isn't even consistent with its characters. In a scene towards the end of the film, Artemis describes himself as a criminal mastermind, when throughout the entirety of the film, he is anything but. He is not a criminal who grew up in a family of criminal masterminds. He's just a spoiled, wealthy brat who had a father who just so happened to be involved in the world of magical creatures. This film just exudes hubris unlike anything I've ever seen from an adaptation before. And I'm an anime fan, so I've seen my fair share of terrible adaptations before, but this? What the writers and the director for this movie did is something I will never ever forget. To me, while watching this film and seeing all the changes they made, I just couldn't help feeling like the reason why they made so many changes was because they thought that they were above the source material. The people behind this film were so arrogant and so full of themselves that they thought they could do Artemis Fowl better than its creator, Clover. And they've proven with this film that they obviously couldn't in such a spectacular fashion. And they get what they deserve, a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes and a universal negative reception on the film. This film made me experience something I've never really experienced before when it came to watching films. It made me feel disheartened watching it. The anger, the rage, the disappointment was all certainly there, as you can probably attest. But as the film progressed, I just lost the will to even call out the bullshit in it. It's so sad and so disheartening how a film about a book I love made me feel this way, but there's nothing I can really do about it. So I'm just gonna end my review/rant there. I'm not gonna make a spoiler in-depth review about this film because I do not want to even recall the events of it ever again. I just want to forget it ever happened. This is gonna be my only video on this topic, and I guess this is my final advice to the people planning to watch it. Just don't. I know that sounds cruel to say because a lot of hard work and effort was put into making this film, even if the outcome is dog shit. But there are just so many better things you could be spending your time on than this film. Artemis Fowl 2020 is a depressingly appalling film that shits on the legacy of its source material and is one of the worst films of 2020 so far.